Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are taking an absolute evolutionary journey through our masterclass source material. We're going to start from the ground up with basic HTML styling, and we're going to evolve all the way to unlocking some seriously advanced SCSS superpowers. So if you already know basic HTML but you want to truly master how things look, feel, and function on the web, you are in the exact right place. We're going to completely break down how to command the browser to paint your web pages exactly the way you envision them. Okay, let's dive into this syllabus. Don't worry, we're going to build up logically so you won't get overwhelmed. We'll start with foundation, syntax, and selectors, move into styling and states, then tackle architecture, modern layouts, polish, and finally, those SCSS superpowers. Level 1, Foundation, CSS syntax, selectors, and the cascade. All right, so you've got your HTML structure, right? But to give that structure the aesthetic it actually deserves, there are three main ways you can apply CSS. First up, you have inline styles. These are written directly inside the HTML tag itself. Honestly, they're really only good for quick JavaScript fixes, so try not to rely on them. Then you have internal styles, which are written inside a style tag right in your document's head. Totally fine for a quick single-page prototype. But the absolute best practice, that's the external CSS file. By linking an external CSS file to your HTML, you keep your code clean, entirely separate, and perfectly reusable across a massive, scalable website. It's really the only way to go for real projects. Now, you might be wondering, what happens when two different CSS rules try to target the exact same element? Well, the browser resolves this using a scoring system known as specificity, often referred to as the cascade. Basic element selectors, like targeting a plain div, are the weakest. Classes, like .card, have more power. IDs, like #header, are stronger still. But a quick word of warning here. Use IDs sparingly and treat the absolute highest rank, the exclamation point important tag, as a nuclear option. Seriously, avoid it unless you enjoy ruining your future self's day when you're trying to override styles later on. Stick to classes for the vast majority of your styling. Level 2, Styling and States, Values, Math, and User Interaction. Stepping beyond basic syntax, modern CSS lets us completely abandon rigid fixed layouts. Instead of absolute pixels, we can use relative units like rem, which scales with the root font size, or viewport widths to make our designs incredibly fluid. Now, what's really interesting here is the math. Using a built-in math function like min 50% 300 pixels literally tells the browser, hey, make this element take up 50% of the screen width, but absolutely never let it get wider than 300 pixels. It's a massive time saver. You get beautifully fluid, responsive designs without having to write a bunch of complex media queries. Plus, we now have custom properties, native CSS variables. This means you can define your brand's primary color exactly once and then just reference that variable everywhere. Furthermore, we want our sites to feel truly alive, right? Pseudo-classes allow us to add interactive states to elements without needing a single line of JavaScript. Want a button to subtly change color when a mouse passes over it? Just tack on the :hover pseudo-class. Need to clearly highlight an input field when a user clicks in to type? Use :focus. It's an absolutely brilliant, frictionless way to handle state styling directly within your style sheet. Level 3, Architecture, the box model, and positioning. All right, let's intentionally slow things down a bit here. We are now tackling one of the most notoriously difficult concepts for beginners: how elements physically take up space on a page. The fundamental rule you have to accept is that everything on the web is a box. It literally doesn't matter if you've styled it to look like a perfect circle or a complex blob. Under the hood, the browser is calculating every single HTML element as a rectangular box. And here's a pro tip for you. Setting box sizing border box at the very top of your document is the modern standard. It ensures that when you set a width on an element, that measurement perfectly includes your padding and borders, completely saving you from blowing out your layout math. So let's break down the anatomy of this box. In the very center, you have your content. That's your actual text or image. Wrapping immediately around that content is your padding. Wrapping around the padding is your border. And finally, pushing other elements away on the very outside is your margin. This is a classic point of confusion, so let's clear it up. The crucial distinction is understanding the exact difference between padding and margin. Padding is inside the element. If you give a button a blue background, that blue color actually expands out into the padding area, which effectively increases the clickable area of that button. Margin, on the other hand, lives entirely outside the border. It is always completely invisible, transparent space that is used purely to push neighboring elements away. Think of padding as putting on a thicker winter coat, and margin as extending your arms to keep people away from you. Which naturally brings us to a practical pattern worth demonstrating carefully, a task that has historically brought developers to tears, perfectly centering a box. Let's walk through the classic, slightly hacky way in CSS. Step 1. We use position absolute. This aggressively rips the element entirely out of the normal document flow. Step 2. We write top 50% and left 50%. Now, logic might tell you this centers it, but actually it places the top left corner of our box dead in the center of the parent container, which makes the whole thing look jarringly off-center. So step 3, the magic fix. We use transform translate -50%, -50%. This pulls the element back to the left and up by exactly 50% of its own width and height. It requires a bit of mental gymnastics, but it does work perfectly. Level 4, modern layouts, Flexbox and Grid. Thankfully, modern CSS offers us salvation from those hacky positioning tricks. Let's look at a second hands-on example, Flexbox centering. Look at how brilliantly simple this is compared to the absolute positioning math we just did. Line 1, display flex, applied to the parent container, instantly changes how all its children render. Line 2, justify content center, perfectly aligns the child item horizontally along the main axis. Line 3, align item center, centers it vertically along the cross-axis. That's it. 3 lines of highly readable semantic code and absolutely no math required. It is a total game changer. Now, while Flexbox is phenomenal, you have to remember it's specifically designed for one-dimensional layouts, meaning it handles flow in either a single row or a single column. But what happens when you need to build a complex two-dimensional page architecture? That's when you bring in CSS Grid. Grid lets you define exact track sizes for rows and columns simultaneously. You can explicitly dictate where elements land on the page using properties like grid template columns. It gives you total, unyielding command over your entire layout structure. Level 5, polish, typography, backgrounds, and animations. Now that our structural boxes are perfectly placed, it is time for the fun part, making our web pages look incredibly professional. A massive part of this polish is typography. Setting a clean font family and weight is vital, sure, but here is a crucial takeaway. Always use a unitless line height, like 1.5. This is highly preferred because it scales dynamically with the font size, preventing messy, overlapping text. For backgrounds, background size cover is your absolute best friend to ensure images fill their containers beautifully without any awkward stretching. And to finish it off, just add a subtle box shadow. It instantly provides depth and literally lifts your elements right off the flat page. But polish isn't just about static looks. It also means motion. You can breathe so much life into your UI by mastering animation. Use CSS transitions to smoothly animate a single property change, like a button slowly fading to a new color when you hover over it. Use transforms to scale, rotate, or move elements visually without breaking the rest of your layout structure. And when you really need something intricate, say a loading spinner that loops forever, you can define multi-step, complex sequences using keyframe animations. Level 6, superpowers, evolving to SCSS, also known as Sass. As your projects grow, plain CSS can start to feel a little, well, repetitive. That's why the industry introduced actual programming logic to styling. Let's clearly define what SCSS is. It's a preprocessor language, acting as a superset of CSS. Now here's the absolutely crucial thing you must remember about how this works. Web browsers cannot and will never read SCSS directly. SCSS is purely for you, the developer. You write your code with all these powerful programming features, and then a build tool automatically compiles it all down into the standard plain CSS that the browser actually understands. Let's fire through some of the immediate quality of life upgrades SCSS provides. Nesting is an absolute lifesaver. Instead of writing out ridiculously long, repetitive selector chains for every single child element, you just nest your .child rules directly inside the .parent block. It perfectly mirrors your HTML structure. You can also split massive, thousands of lines long style sheets into tiny, manageable chunks called partials. Imagine having one specific file just for variables, another just for buttons, and then pulling them all together modularly using the @use rule. It keeps your workspace incredibly clean. And this brilliantly illustrates how SCSS introduces actual programming functions to automate tedious CSS writing. You can create mixins. Think of a mixin like a custom button generator. You write a block of code once, and you can literally include it anywhere, passing in different colors or sizes as parameters.
It's wildly efficient. You can also use the Add Extend feature with placeholder classes to share a base set of styles across dozens of elements. This completely automates the styling process and adheres strictly to the dry principle. Don't repeat yourself.
But honestly, the deepest superpowers of SCSS are its logic and control flow. Yes, you can literally use if statements and for loops directly in your styles. Need to generate a complex 12-column grid system? In plain CSS, you'd handwrite 12 different classes. In SCSS, you just write one simple 3-line @for loop that programmatically generates all the math for you. You can even store your entire brand's design tokens, like breakpoints or color palettes, in maps, which are basically key value pairs, ensuring everything in your codebase is infinitely scalable. So, to wrap this all up, let's compare the two. Plain CSS is fantastic, and it has come a massive way, even adding native variables, but it can still require a ton of manual, repetitive coding on large-scale projects. SCSS gives you that beautiful modular architecture, automated generation through loops, and keeps your codebase exceptionally organized. But I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. As native plain CSS gets stronger every single year, literally adding native nesting and powerful new math functions of its own, will preprocessors like SCSS remain essential forever, or will plain CSS eventually absorb every single one of its superpowers? Keep building, keep experimenting, and see for yourself.